Truth Unveiled here, and today we're following up with our series on true locations. Today we're going to be talking about Ancient Babylon Part 2, and I'm going to be showing you some more interesting maps that come all the way from the 1300s, showing you where true Babylon really is. We'll also be taking a look at a few book sources too, but this is just going to be a follow-up and a quick video because I really wanted to share these sources with you. Now, if you already have not, please take a look at part 1 of our Babylon video that's linked in the description box below, because what you're looking at is the actual remains of scriptural Babylon, where in so-called Sudan as it's known today, with the pyramids there in Meroe along the Nile River. Now we'll briefly recap what we went over in part 1. Now in part 1 we talked about how the real scriptural Babylon is in a place where it's desolate and there's no inhabitant according to Jeremiah 51:37. So therefore the one that they tell us and spoon feed us in Iraq, well, that cannot be scriptural Babylon because the population of that one is well over 1 million, even though scripturally speaking the population is in fact 0. We also talked about how Babylon covered a much larger span, how it even extended into Eritrea, and we showed you some ancient remains of a town there in Adulis, and even showed you some links and sources there too. But today we're just going to be focusing on maps specifically, along with historical and geographical accounts. Now, we also told you why it's so important for Babylon to be along the Nile River, ancient civilization, the cradle of civilization, because here's a map from 1525, nearly 500 years ago, that we've shown several times in several documentaries that show Babylon near Egypt, Sudan, the Nile River along the Nile. There's Meroe, where those pyramids are, and here's Babylon right here. And we also talked about the spelling and why that spelling is so significant. Because when you look at this book, and the book will be linked in the description box below, but as you can see here from the Cambridge Ancient History Part 1, you'll see on page 150 that it is held by some that Babelim, that it tells you the actual spelling right there, or Hebrew Babal, was originally Sumerian, so it tells you the ancient spelling. So again, we have a match linguistically speaking with the geographical Babylon that was listed in 1525 around the Sudan region. And then we also showed you linguistically speaking in the video how it's called Babel in Aramaic, Babeli in Elamite, Babelim in Akkadian, and then Babelim on the 1525 map that we just showed you earlier ago, not to mention the book to go along with it that we showed you that also matches the same spelling in Akkadian, just like how we showed you with Agade or Agadi in when it comes to Assyria, also on ancient maps, with ancient Assyria as far west as in so-called Niger and Nigeria in that region. And if you would like to learn more about Assyria, please take a look at our playlist that's linked in the description box below, covering more on ancient locations and true locations. But what's also interesting to note is that when it comes to this, there are also several other maps that show Babylon within the region up here towards northern Egypt within the Cairo area, as I'm about to show you in other maps that have not yet been seen on the channel, but what we will now show you. And this is a map that was shown in a documentary from 1667 that also shows the scriptural Ammon in Libya today and not in that fake Jordan. Now, this is why it's so important for us to read through these ancient books and really seek and search this stuff, because what you will start to find is that you will start to find the truth indeed. Now, we're here in a book from 1829 that even tells you that there are two different Babylons. Again, which one is the scriptural one? Just like we talked about for the Jerusalem Hayakal or temple when it comes to the Euphrates River, once upon a time there were two of them. Which which one is the real scriptural one. What am I talking about? Because now I'm here at a book from 1829 that says the Chronicle of Geoffrey, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but this is Marshal of Champagne and Romania, and we're at page 16 that talks more about Babylon. And by the way, this comes from the history that was documented back as early as the 1200s. Well, what did they know Babylon to be as early as the 1200s AD, historically speaking? Because it even says right here, it became known as Babylon was the destination of the Crusaders because of the power of the Turks might more effectually be overthrown in Babylon than in any other country. But there's a note right here. What does this note say? Let's read it together. It says, Babylon, Cairo in Egypt, not the city in the Euphrates, even though we know where the real Euphrates is. But this lets you know right here that the Babylon once upon a time in the year 1200s AD and in the year 1100s AD was where? In Egypt along the Nile in Cairo. Now the question is, do we have ancient maps to back this up? Why, yes, we do, because I'm going to show you a few maps that come as early as the 1300s showing Babylon in a very particular region in a particular place. And you're going to see exactly where it is. Now, the earliest comes from well over 640 years ago from right here, the Catalan Atlas, which says that it is the most important map of the medieval period in the Catalan language that was drawn and written in 1375. Now here is the actual map right here, and I will link all of this in the description box below so you can take a look at it on your own time. But if I zoom in towards the Nile region a little bit more, this is what you start to see. And so now I've enlarged the map so you can have a better picture of it. Now again, this map comes all the way from 1375, 640 years at least. And so if we scroll all the way up towards the area of the Nile Delta, this is what we see. Scroll down and you see, what is this called? Babylonia right there. You see the flag right here, Babylonia, Babylon along the Nile. But don't be in denial, because now I'm about to show you another map that comes from 1387 from the same cartographer. Now this was produced just a couple of years later, but still how many hundreds of years old? Well over 600 years ago from the 14th century. And as you see, there's Babylonia right there. Babylon once again shown around the what? Around the Egyptian region along the Nile River right here. And I'll zoom in just a little bit more so that you can see it right there in the same region. And if I zoom out, you'll see that it's right here, where in the African region along these areas. Here is another ancient map that comes from 1450. So this map is what? From the 15th century and is well over 550 years old. Now, as you can see right here, this map shows a ton of stuff actually. And what's very interesting about it is when you zoom into it, you will see that the map is right side up and not upside down, meaning it has Africa drawn what? From south to north. And if you just zoom in a little bit, if we keep zooming in and keep zooming in along the Nile, you have what right there? Babylonia in this region over here. If you zoom in right there, once upon a time, what was this region known as? Once upon a time, those pyramids that you see uninhabited, what was that really known as at one time? Because these ancient maps are telling a completely different story from the one we're told. But as you can see over here, we have Libya over there. There's the desert over here. There's Egypt over there. And there's Babylon right here, as the map shows according to the map. And again, it's drawn from south to north, right side up. And again, if you would like to take a look at this, please do so in the description box below, where you will be able to see it. Not only that, but if you would like to see all of the other maps of Babylon and other scriptural regions and places, please do so and take a look at it in our playlist that's linked in the description box below. This is a map from Munster that comes from 1540. Now, I did show a map from Munster before, however, it was in a different year. This map will also show Babylon in that same region. Now, again, this is from 1540, so well over 400 years ago. And when you take a look at it, you see Babylon right here along what? Along the Egypt River or the Nile River right here. Once again, Babylon in this region, Babylon in so-called Africa. Just a few years later, so 8 years later in 1548, this map was then drawn right here that you can see from Gastaldi that comes from 1548 of Africa right here. And if you zoom in a little bit more, you see Ethiopia. And we've also talked about how once upon a time, Ethiopia extended well beyond the country borders than what it's known for today. Now, what's interesting about this map too is that you even see Egypt down here. But if you keep going up along the Nile River, once again, what do you see right there? You see it plain as day, Babylon right there. If we zoom in a little bit more, we actually can be able to see it and make it out clearly that, again, Babylon is in the same region from not one, not two, not three, but once again, multiple witnesses, multiple cartographers, multiple people who have actually been in these regions. And again, this comes as early as what? And documented as early as 1100s AD, because again, all the other original documents have either been burned or hidden, and maps have been burned and hidden, but not anymore. The truth is now finally being revealed. And then there was another map that was published in 1559 right here from Matthias Prunes, and I'm going to show you its map. It's called Chart of the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and the coasts of Western Europe and Northwest Africa. So this map was published 11 years later as of 1559, well over 450 years ago. Now you have to kind of tilt your head to the right to be able to see the map. Up here you have Europe over here, Asia over there, and then Africa over here. This river right here lets you know that it is in fact the Nile River. And if you just zoom in a little bit more on this map, you see right there that it says what? And Babylonia, this big old thing right here, it shows Babylonia right there in where? The Nile region. Then there's another map also from 1561 that shows the exact same thing right here that shows from Russelli's 1561. If we zoom in a little bit more, we see the exact same thing, Babylon on the same location near Memphis along the Nile River. And again, we've already shown you other maps that show Babylon as southward towards Sudan in that region too. And then in our other video, we've also talked about what? The Tower of Babel being around the Eritrea region in Bab el-Mandeb. So we just showed you maps from 1540, 1548, 1559, and now 1561. So within the same proximity, the same area of time, what? Back in the 16th century. So once again, well over 450 years ago, showing you Babylon within the same region. And then finally, there's this map that was published by George Braun and Franz Hogenberg in 1575. So once again, still in the 16th century, well over 400 years ago, 440 years ago to be precise. Now, what this map will show you is actually the title right here. Now, of course, the title is in a different language. It's not in English. However, if you translate it properly, and I'll just zoom in a little bit so that you can see it right here, there's the word Cairo or Cairo, as you can see, and then the word Babylon right here too. And so the actual translation for this actually means Cairo, which was once called Babylon, Egypt's largest city. Talking about what? Coptic Cairo, Old Cairo, the Babylon fortress, and the fortress of Babylon that's still there to this day in Cairo, Egypt, that you can see. But I'll link this in the description box below also, and this gives more information about it and how it came to be with the fortress. But continue to please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha for even more truth. But this is Truth Unveiled here, saying as always, Shalom.